Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to another predictions and speculation video with Star Wars Lads. Today, we will be talking about episode 11, which is the penultimate episode of this show. I can't believe we're already here, but we're starting this finale, so we're going to try to speculate what might happen in these next two episodes, specifically episode 11. Before we do so, please hit that like button down below and subscribe to our channel. We're on the road to 1,000 subs. We're less than 50 away, so please help us get to 1,000. It'll be a huge milestone for our channel, and it'll really help us give you guys even better content here in the future. Subscribing is the best way to show us that you enjoy our content and you want to see more. So please subscribe if you're watching this video and you haven't subscribed yet. Comment below, let us know what you thought of Andor episode 10 and what you think will happen in episode 11 based on what happened in 10. If you've not seen our review of Andor episode 10, it is up on the channel. If you're just joining us for the first time with our Andor coverage, we post our reviews every single Wednesday morning. If you've not seen one of these videos before, we do this in 3 different sections. We talk about the 3 main plots that have mostly gone on the show. First one will be Andor, Cassian, and what his role will be in the show. The second will be Dedra, the ISB, and all of the angles around there. And the third will be Luthen and Mon Mothma, the politicking side, the kind of espionage side of this whole show. So let's start with Cassian, who just underwent his prison break that we've been leading up to for the last 3 episodes. And that went well. They escaped. We saw him running on the shore. We didn't get to see what happened to some of the rest of his crew. Kino Loy, we believe Melshi is also with him running around there. So we're getting out of the prison, but how do we get off this planet? How do we get off Narkina 5? Where are we going from here? What's going to happen with Cassian in the next episode? Sanak, what are your thoughts on what's going to go on with Cassian in episode 11?
Yeah, it's very interesting that we have this shot of Cassian and supposedly Melchi running around. How are you going to get off the planet? You don't have any credits to your name. You're just a number. People are going to be looking for you. You're wearing uniforms. Like, what is the next step? But at the same time, how much time will be dedicated to them getting off planet and by what means? Maybe this is a way for Cassian to get back into contact with Luthen, get a ride from someone that he knows is secure and can get him off planet. And maybe that's how like a Vel or Syntha shows up onto Narkina 5. I don't know, because I find it just as likely that we just kind of skip over. Like, we just assume he figured his way off the planet. And that could work. Everything has been so grounded in the show that for a guy who has literally nothing to his name, and as talented and skilled as he is, I still think he would need a little bit of help to get off the planet by himself. I think we've been kind of hinting at the Marva stuff for a while, like with the big thing with her. We don't see her last episode, and we see Bix's reaction is Bix seeing the doctor being heard because Marva is refusing to take her meds because she wants to eat. It's like inevitable for her, and the lack of appetite is not going to help her out. And I think this is a woman who thinks that she's going to die. She's on the verge of dying. Something's happening to her physiologically, maybe intentionally or so. I don't know. But it's pretty interesting because just when in episode 7, when she sees Cassian again, she's like, I want to be a rebel. I want to do all these things. But she's also like an old woman who's in a wheelchair, essentially. Just the final stuff with Ferrix, with Andor, Cassian, will come with him kind of being drawn out because of his mother's health. His arrival does cause everything to explode. That's what we know is going to happen. But I think that's probably the thread that we follow there most. I'm not really sure if he has like the first taste of like a rebel cell. He is with Melshi, and I don't think Melshi just goes off and does random things. I feel like he would have now like the fervor to be a rebel soldier, and I could see Cassian hold off on that himself till the end of this first season. Now, at the same time, we've basically forgotten about this, but this whole season began with Cassian trying to look for his sister, and there's a whole flashback dedicated in those first 3 episodes. So maybe that's what really draws him, like, more than anything out. Like, maybe the ISB finds out that he's looking for his sister and plants some concrete amount of evidence for him to come. I don't know, but I think that this would be the right time to bring that plotline back. I don't know if they will, but it feels like such a huge part of those first three episodes from the premiere, and to just abandon it, especially as we're at the end, would feel very strange to me.
Everything needs to be tied together here. We've had this finale, this two-part finale, if it is going to be like that, needs to tie in the entirety of Cassian's story to really push him into the direction we see him going, especially if next season is jumping a year pretty much every 3-4 episodes in time. It will mostly be made up of mini arcs. I think this show really needs to nail who Cassian is before the adventures he goes on over the 4 years leading up to Rogue One, starting next season. I think his sister is a big part of that. Obviously, seeing his origin at the beginning in those first 3 episodes was a big thing as well. We dedicated a lot of time to seeing that. Maybe we go back to that planet. Episode 7, I believe, was called Announcement. I think next episode is going to be like the reemergence episode. I think everyone's going to be hunting Cassian once they start to realize that the prison break gets out there, right? If Aldani leaked to the media, there's some way, at least through Lonnie, this is going to leak to Luthen. And we already know that Syntha and Vel are looking for Cassian actively. Syntha's watching Marva's house, waiting. We also see like somebody who's watching the house who pretty much looks like an Imperial spy. Everybody's looking for Cassian at this point. So whether he goes back to Ferrix or he's on the run with Melshi, just flying around the galaxy looking for his sister again, everyone is going to be on his tail. He is going to do something in this episode that is going to kickstart everybody's excitement towards what's going to happen in 12, where everyone's going to meet up on Ferrix and we probably have some type of big showdown, some first real rebellion. I think we're going to see that. I could also see it kind of being a smaller scale story because we put so much time with Cassian in this episode. I could see it mostly being bits of him going on the journey, looking for his sister, him getting back into the galaxy, while the majority of the runtime is taken up by our other players. So let's talk about some of those other players. We have the ISB, and usually we talk about Ferrix here, but we kind of just talked about that with Cassian's section. I think what we really got to talk about here is not just Dedra and also Cyril, who was absent from episode 10. How is he going to be used in these last 2 episodes? But also now Lonnie, who is now goes from guy who talks in the background in these meetings to like actual major player in this show, with the reveal that he is Luthen's inside man in the ISB. So, like, what are your thoughts on where the ISB angle is going in the next episode and how all these threads are going to start tying in together?
I don't know if I'm reading into it too much, but I don't think Dedra, even if Lonnie's standard protocol for how to dispose of the ship, investigate, was all by the book, she has done things by her gut, by her former law experience. So maybe, the hunt is slightly diverted, at least for the next episode, onto Lonnie. Maybe Lonnie is like the one that's being pulled apart. I would kind of love Cyril to, in the name of Imperial justice and all that, be charmed by Dedra to be sent and find out what Lonnie knows and kill him, dispose of him. And in his twisted mind, I want to see if it's a small struggle or if it's like instantaneous that he'll do anything, because as long as he's convinced that he's doing it for the Empire, and even threats within the Empire by other Imperials are deemed sufficiently bad enough for his order and his dream and his visions, for whatever he thinks about Dedra. Maybe that's how he's used there first. Like every other part of the storylines, because we finished the arc with the prison break, it's hard to see exactly where it picks up from. Maybe there's more interrogation going on. Maybe she's the one who finds out about the Kerani people and then plants the seeds for Cassian to follow, creating a trail for him. Either way, it's got to be a very sociopathic thing that she does. I just think that Lonnie is pretty much has the red uniform on. He's ready to die. I don't know. She doesn't have her death troopers yet, like we've seen in the trailers. So maybe she's By the end of the episode, she's able to lure in Cassian. It's a big trap that he still has to spring regardless, maybe because even if he figures out it's all a false trail, there's still the reality that his mother is possibly dying and possibly in really bad health. So he'll have to kind of come and spring the trap, and that'll only work to Dedra's advantage. There's a lot of potential with how she pulls the strings and what she cuts off, and how she becomes even more of this fascist completionist and successful one at that too. So I think those are just some of my thoughts there.
I think the ISB is going to have actually probably the biggest role next episode out of all the factions, or tied with maybe Luthen for the biggest role. So we talked a lot about this rebel group, the 50-man Kriegers group that's going to get killed. Luthen's going to let them fall into the trap by the ISB. I don't know if we see that, like we talked about last predictions. It's been something we talked about this whole time. We haven't seen any of the people they've talked about so far. So I doubt we actually see this whole thing go down. We can kind of just imagine it from what they've told us. Dedra is going to be involved with that. She's obviously taken an active role in that, and she thinks it's going to lead her to Axis. There's got to be security cameras on this prison. There's going to be some way where she is brought to, or it's brought to her that Cassian was one of the people leading this entire revolt. I could see her going back to Narkina 5 and go into this prison. Maybe Kino is still there, and maybe we get some Andy Serkis scenes with Dedra. That could be something interesting. That could also tie into Cassian's storyline. Like, we could see the prisoners who didn't make it out, or some type of massacre for the prisoners that escaped, that they're captured by the Imperials. There's got to be some really fast, active response to this. Obviously, one of the themes of this show is that 15 years in, the Empire has gone from like heavily militarily active in those first 5 years or so, really setting the foundations for the empire, really establishing what it looks like, but also trying to disguise it as just an evolved version of the Republic, to now they've had so little opposition over the last 15 years that they've kind of gotten complacent. And as Cassian says in the beginning of the show, fat and satisfied, they're just sitting around doing, not expecting anyone to actually challenge them. There's this element of, when do you start mobilizing your massive military to deal with these problems? Obviously, Aldani was the first step. This massive prison break, especially if Luthen leaks it to the media, or Lonnie, leaks it to the media, somehow it's leaked and people find out about it. You can't let 1,000 prisoners escape a prison. Like, you just can't. Like, that's something they have to completely shut down. So to me, it would make sense to meet whoever is left on Narkina 5 with massive force, and with Dedra being involved, and probably some type of video of Cassian escaping this prison or leading this escape. I think it's going to finally be brought to her attention, and maybe Cyril's brought along for the ride as like the Cassian expert, or the person who's kind of trying to trace Cassian's steps. I do think Lonnie's dead as well, because we had so much investment in his family in this last episode. He's dead in one of these two episodes. To me, I think it's probably 12. And I think with Luthen, progressing in the rebellion, progressing into a more open place by the end of this season, he's not necessarily a person that is absolutely needed for the rebellion. As we start to have more open revolt, open conflict, the secrecy of the rebellion might not necessarily be as important to Luthen. It might be a chip he realizes he can sacrifice. So that is what I think will happen with the ISB angle. So the last thing we have to talk about is Mon Mothma, who we didn't get to see much of in the last episode, but the scene we did get had quite a bit of promise for where her storyline might go, specifically with this familial relationship, which has been the prominent piece of her arc throughout this entire story for her. And what will happen here, especially with her relationship with her daughter and her husband, which has been so keenly shown throughout these episodes, but yet never really given full meaty moments that I think we probably will get here in 11 and 12. Sanak, what are your thoughts on the Mon Mothma storyline and what's going to happen here with her family.
Um, I thought that line that the Davos guy had was like, "That's the first like lie that you've told me here, or like non-truth." About how she wouldn't even consider thinking about having her daughter have an introduction with his son in the betrothed ways of Chandrilian arranged marriage or whatnot. She won't do it. I don't think she will. Don't think her husband will necessarily be as rigid. It already seems like he's kind of in this guy's pocket. So I could see her push against everything and think that she has won. And unfortunately, come into her home and see that her husband, just like the very first episode, has surprised her first episode on Coruscant has surprised her once more by having these two kids just having fun together. And I think to a degree that will shatter her, that will force her to disconnect from her family and become who she is in Rogue One and who she is in Return of the Jedi. I think that that would be a great time to have divorce, space divorce, possibly, or just kicking him out. Something will happen with this family that it's gonna feel horrible to some degree, but to another degree, it's like yeah, we kind of were all expecting something like this to happen once the family was introduced. I do want to mention something about Luthen though, because as much as like a shadowy, powerful figure, like the reiteration of who he is was made in this previous episode, Cassian is still a wild card, not only for knowing who he is, but I think there's something that he still sees in Cassian. And I want to see if this reunion keeps him unstable, keeps him on his toes, makes him feel like, you know what? Screw being this horrible, miserable person when I can fight for something, even if it is dark and twisted in my own way. There's a joy in being able to do something in the light instead of just being the shadow that's forever forgotten, which will finally, I don't know if it's in this episode or in episode 12, get us a spinning laser ship. Because you don't put that in a trailer and then make me wait 10 episodes for that. That's like the biggest action piece that we could have gotten in this whole series. So I'd very much like to see it. And I'd very much like it to be because he's been motivated to stop playing these two characters that he's so good at.
I think, like with what I said with Cassian, he's going to be on the hunt for Cassian himself. Like I said with Vel and Syntha for Cassian's part too. Like Cassian is that loose end who knows his face. He said he already sentenced Cassian to death. Basically, he doesn't want him around. We see how ruthless he is in this episode. It's another reminder of how much willing he is to sacrifice pieces for the greater good, or at least the greater good he deems is a greater good. Definitely, I think he is going after Cassian, especially if it is blasted all over the news that Cassian is one of these people leading this revolt, or he's somehow leaked that Cassian is here on Narkina 5. This is where he is. Everyone's going for him. I think Luthen is going to be a part of that for sure. The Mon Mothma stuff as well. Yeah, I think the way we set this up, her family is revolting against her actively. Every single episode, they don't like her role. They like living as the Imperials. They don't want to push back. They like their posh lifestyle. And I do think this guy is going to go over her head, directly come into contact with her husband. And I think her daughter's going to want to get married to this kid. I think she is going to not see this as a problem. She's going to be like, why are you pushing back against our family's tradition? Why are you, is this because of your affair with this other banker guy that she thinks she's having? All these pieces, all this built up tension in her family is going to start crumbling down. Mon is going to see that she has to sacrifice the family life, which she's thought as more idyllic than it actually has been. Does she have to sacrifice that for the rebellion? Is it even worth keeping that around? These people obviously don't share her ideals. Does she start to share who she is with her family? Does she think that will win them back? I think that's where we're going to see that kind of mental conflict with her, because she has been keeping so many secrets from them. It's turned their whole family life into something that, might not have been perfect before, but is definitely, definitely falling apart now. And whether she cares about that, we're not necessarily sure. She definitely cares about her daughter. I don't think she cares about her husband at all. But she's been with this guy long enough, at least 14 years, because this guy, her daughter is 13. So she's been with him 13 to 14 years. She's got to care about him enough to try to win him back once more before she abandons him. But I think her daughter is going to be the thing that both of them are fighting for. Obviously, this marriage, this whole relationship dissolves by the time we get to Star Wars Rebels. So that is pretty soon after the show. That's a couple of years. It's a good human story as well. It's a story that can push Mon Mothma out of her comfort zone. Let her take that first step. Let her decide, what am I willing to sacrifice for the rebellion? And it would be nice to see some more intimate scenes with her and her family discussing really like their family in a candid setting rather than just putting on a face for the public. I would like to see all of that. I think that's going to wrap it up for Andor episode 11 predictions speculation. Thank you all so much for watching. Like I said at the beginning, if you have not subscribed to the channel, please do so. It'll really help us out. We're less than 50 subs away from 1,000, and that's going to be a big milestone for us on this channel. It'll help us continue to give you guys better content. If you've not checked out how to adapt Attack of the Clones into a Disney Plus series, check the video out. It came out on Tuesday, as well as our review for Andor episode 10. And then stay tuned next week for our latest tier list. The poll will be closing, so if you have not voted in that yet, do so within the next day or so, because it will be closing soon. And then stay tuned for episode 11 review next week for Andor, and more predictions and speculation. The last prediction and speculation for season 1 of Andor for the finale, episode 12, which will be coming out in a couple weeks. So thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.